Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to let the Honourable Minister of Finance be aware that during my election campaign, when she characterized me in front of a national audience as cold, cruel, and small, she had it wrong. And throughout this speech, I think she'll understand and learn that perhaps I'm a warm, generous, and kind human being. But mischaracterization is the MO of the Liberal Party. I've only been here 2 weeks. 2 weeks, and I've already seen it. The day I was sworn in, Madam Speaker, I walked through the halls of West Block, and something colorful caught my eye. It was the red head of a small 5 or 6 year old boy who was getting a tour or walking around with his mom or his dad. The young boy was gazing around at these tall columns and the thick walls that we've got that hold up this endlessly high ceiling. I too feel not unlike that small red-headed boy when I take my place here in the Parliament of Canada. Those thick walls represent to me the strong foundation upon which Canada has been built over many years. A foundation that was laid over those years, including before Canada the country came into being. And for a nation like this one, the laying of the foundation is something upon which we continue to build. The great Sir Wilfrid Laurier put it well, and he often did. I want the marble to remain marble, the granite to remain granite, the oak to remain oak. And out of these elements, I would build a nation great among the nations of the world. Madam Speaker, I want to touch briefly upon those builders whom we've come to identify as Canadians. The Indigenous peoples, the original inhabitants of this land, and we must continue our efforts towards reconciliation. First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, along with the work of people who came later, principally the French and English in the early days, laid the groundwork for what would become the Dominion of Canada. However, given the lamentable state of Canadian history education in our country, I hesitate to call attention to some of the greatest citizens for fear of losing my audience at home. But for posterity's sake, and in recognition of what they did to help build this country, I'll take that risk. Some of the greats, in my view, Madam Speaker, while strictly speaking may not all have been Canadians, they were builders of this great land, of what would become known as Canada. The great generals, Montcalm and Wolfe, Sir Isaac Brock and Arthur Currie, scientists like Banting and Best, our early foundational prime ministers, Macdonald and Laurier. Let's not forget Colonel R.S. McLaughlin from Oshawa, my hometown. Madam Speaker, Canadian heroes come from many walks of life. I'm thinking of examples like Terry Fox, sports heroes like Wayne Gretzky or Tom Longboat, artists like Gord Downie, and Ottawa's own, and a personal favorite, Paul Anka. And of course, we have to make room for the more recent greats. Summer McIntosh impressed us all this summer at the Paris Olympics, not only with her phenomenal athleticism, but also with her grace and poise on the podium and elsewhere. I hear last month she's even old enough to vote. Madam Speaker, all Canadians will have their own list of favorite great Canadians. The list to choose from is nearly endless. I encourage all of us to celebrate them in our own ways and not just in this place. We need more celebration of Canadian history. As the great historian Jack Granatstein wrote in his famous 1998 book, Who Killed Canadian History? History is memory, inspiration, and commonality, and a nation without a memory is every bit adrift as an amnesiac wandering the streets. History matters, and we forget this truth at our peril. There's one more group of people I will also include in the list of great Canadians, the members, veterans, and families of our Canadian Armed Forces. The Army, the Royal Canadian Air Force, the Royal Canadian Navy, and Special Operations Forces. We salute both the regular and reservists who, in the words of Winston Churchill, are twice the citizen. Our national foundation supports our aspirations for greatness, and that is what we are in this place to do. That is what the people of Toronto St. Paul's have asked me to do. Preserve what we have and build something better. Madam Speaker, we must focus on what unites us as Canadians and not on what divides us. We must not pick winners, but create an environment where anyone from anywhere can do anything. That's the Canadian promise. We also strive for peace, order, and good government. Madam Speaker, this is the Canadian way. There are foundation Canadian values that we hold dear and must protect. These are the foundational Canadian values that appear to be at risk in recent months. I've witnessed, Madam Speaker, in our Canadian streets, on our Canadian campuses, so-called protest calling for the death of those in our Jewish community. They are sponsored by known terrorist-linked entities. This is not the Canadian way. When foundational Canadian values are under attack, we are all under attack. And yet, Madam Speaker, this government supports the funding of those who would challenge this or take on this anti-Canadian charge. Employees of UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, in part funded by the Canadian government, are known to have held hostages on October 7th. Canada is in part paying the salaries of combatants who work for the Hamas terrorist regime. Madam Speaker, it was these same Hamas terrorists who murdered 8 of our fellow citizens. Good people from Vancouver, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, and elsewhere. Alexander Luck, Ben Mizrahi, Adi Vital Kaploon, Shir Georgi, Vivian Silver, Netta Epstein, Tiferet Lapido, Judy Weinstein Hagai. May their memories be a blessing. There are still 101 hostages being held in Gaza, Madam Speaker, and not all amongst the living. People held against their will, held in the darkness and dampness of a subterranean warren of war, a tunnel system created for the sole purpose of waging war. Every day, I think about those people held in captivity in those deplorable conditions, and I think, too, of the innocents of Gaza used as human shields by an uncivilized terrorist organization. I encourage all in this place to do the same and give thought to these victims. Madam Speaker, I made my remarks earlier about Canadian history and Canadian heroes because I care deeply about this country and its past. But I care equally about the future of this great nation. I got into political life not because I'm crazy, but because I thought about my 2 daughters, Leah and Charlotte, both in their 20s. I thought about the kids I see in the park and the ones I see clinging to their mother's legs when I knock on doors. I thought about the fact that they don't appear to have the same opportunities for success as young people did a generation ago. They don't have the same Canada. This is not the same Canada. Madam Speaker, one must leave a country in better shape than the way they found it. Can we say that's true for this NDP Liberal government that took over 9 years ago? Can we say that's true for the Liberal Prime Minister? No. Does anyone even believe they have what it takes? No. The economics of this country have become stagnant. The feeling of optimism has evaporated. The sense that Canada has a great destiny thrust into the intention of the future, as the philosopher George Grant put it, is absent. So I'm here, thanks to the good people of Toronto St. Paul's, to be a part of something bigger than any single one of us. I'm here to help build a better country, one day at a time. I'm here to work my hardest for the people of my riding, yes, but also for every last person in this country. Let's remember that as we engage in the great debates of our country. I'm new, so that's perhaps why I'm filled with so much optimism. But optimism can take us a long way, and I'm delighted to be here, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much.